hello to anyone who's there. I'm just going to be doing a brief stream while Nat's cooking some delicious dinner. It smells wonderful. We're going to be streaming Resident Evil 6 in a minute. But first, let's see what's going on. People are mad about a thing. Let's see what's up. Let's see what is up. Seems like Margaret Atwood tweeted a link to an article. Right. Okay. The article in the Toronto Star is called "Why Can't We Say Woman Anymore?" by Rosie DiMano. Okay. Well, that's frustrating. That's frustrating on the face of it. Rosie DiMano. Well, you know, she's not flagged in Shinigami Eyes. In fact, she's not flagged as either red or green. Seems like there's someone people haven't, heard of much before. But we'll see. Let me just update Discord and say that I'm live now. Where's my stream updates? Live for a brief mo, checking out the Margaret Atwood situation. Right. Right. It's called Why Can't We Say Women? Why Can't We Say Woman Anymore? And that looks pretty bad. I thought I'd do a stream because the article is behind a paywall, and so a lot of people are getting mad. But you can't read the article unless you pay, and I assume that the people who are mad are not giving money to the thing. I got around it with ways. Anyway, so let's quickly read this article. You make me feel like a natural person with a vagina. Man, I feel like a person who menstruates. Oh, pretty person with a cervix. Apologies to Aretha Franklin, Shania Twain, and Roy Orbison, but this appears to be where we're heading if language radicals get their way. Wow, okay. And they're getting it, tying everybody up in linguistic knots so as not to offend or get clobbered by the social media mob. The inclusive objective is worthy, the erasure of women is not. Woman is in danger of becoming a dirty word, struck from the lexicon of officialdom, eradicated from medical vocabulary, and expunged from conversation. I mean, that's a lie, is the thing about that. That's not true. Okay. Why is a bitchy thing to do half the world's population? I don't understand that sentence. Why is a bitchy thing to do half the world's population? Oh, which is a bitchy thing to do to half the world's population? Jeez, I gotta make sure I'm reading this more carefully since I'm doing everyone the service of reading them this article. Anyway. Margaret Atwood shared this article. For those who are just joining me in chat now, Margaret Atwood shared this article, and it looks like she's kind of just falling for turf bait. So that's frustrating. But I saw someone say, we all know where this is going with Margaret Atwood. It'll be this, and then she'll be saying that trans people are too toxic, and then she'll be endorsing TERFs and blah, blah, blah. And I just find that a little bit... Let me go on close up for a second. I just find that a little bit pessimistic for one of the most prominent feminists of the last century, who has vocally supported trans people specifically against TERFs in the past. And I just want to give a moment of benefit of the doubt and just check out what's going on here. So yeah, what it looks like is like she has fallen for some bait. However, the stuff in this article is pretty gross. To say something like, woman is in danger of becoming a dirty word struck from the lexicon of officialdom, eradicated from medical vocabulary, and expunged from conversation. That's a lie. That's a lie. People aren't going to stop saying woman. That's a lie. That's a lie, and it's kind of a weird lie, and I don't like it. It should leave well-meaning people tongue-tied lest they be attacked as transphobic or otherwise insensitive to the increasingly complex constructs of gender. Whew, that's a sentence. Jesus Christ. The Lancet, the prestigious and highly influential British medical journal, put bodies with vaginas on the cover of its latest issue, referring to an article inside entitled Periods on Display, a review of an exhibit about the history of menstruation at the Vagina Museum in London. I see no issue so far. It's the Vagina Museum. Okay. Maybe the editors who tweeted the piece were just looking for clickbait with a pull quote on the cover teasing that, historically, the anatomy and physiology of such bodies have been neglected. This, although the author had used the phrase bodies with vaginas only once and women 4 times. Interesting. A hellstorm broke out, quite rightly, with readers indignant over the wording. As one, an author of books on childbirth and women's bodies wrote, "You're telling us that you've noticed that for hundreds of years you've neglected and overlooked women, then in the same breath, you're unable to name those people you've been ignoring." The magazine's editor-in-chief apologized hastily. This isn't an argument against gender self-identification. Surely we're well past that. It's more about infelicitous evolution of language, which is fundamentally about communicating clearly. See, I'm just going to pause there before I carry on, because yes, language is about communicating clearly, and my mum is actually a linguist, and studies like how language works in the brain, things to do with like the pathways that you create, like, so, check this out, like, pathways to words that are high use are well traveled essentially in your brain, and so often when you slip up and say the wrong word, you're gonna say a word that is higher use, like more frequently used than the word you were intending to say. So next time that you have a little slip up and you say the wrong word, think about that. Think about why that is, because that's what's usually going on there. And my mum is someone who has complained about the evolution of language in the past, and she's said, like, I don't like this trend or this one, but she'll always say to me, it's beyond my control. Like, I can be annoyed by this stuff, but it's beyond my control. I'm never gonna change the tide by moaning about this. Language just evolves the way that it is evolving. One thing, a pet peeve, for example, she's bothered by the grammar of if and whether, right? You're supposed to use whether when referring to something with an alternative, right? So whether I go to the shops or not, okay, that's grammatical, and if I go to the shops is grammatical, but if I go to the shops or not is not grammatical. But she's like, there's nothing I can do. It annoys me, but I'm not going to change it by moaning. People will carry on saying if I go to the shops or not. Yes, language is about communicating clearly, but it's also about communicating easily. And for that reason, people just aren't going to stop saying women. And it's a ridiculous thing to say, to claim that they're going to stop saying women. And if you see an article that's claiming that people are going to stop saying women, you should think, you have a little bell going off. You should be, oh, wait, hang on a second. People are going to stop saying women? People are going to stop saying women? I'm going to be thrown in jail just for saying I'm a woman? You can't even say you're a woman nowadays. People jump out, throw you in jail. Since I'm paused on the article, let me give an overview of the situation, okay? The term woman is actually very important to trans people, specifically trans women. And the organization around, politically around women as a group and talking about misogyny is very important to trans people. In particular, there is a lot of writing about about trans misogyny and how specifically trans women are targeted. But that is exactly where discussion of people with the body parts that are relevant to the medicine that you're discussing in a medical context becomes relevant, because not all women have cervixes, not all women menstruate, not all women breastfeed or can bear children. For one, and vice versa, not all people who have those qualities or do those things are women either. And I just want to point this one out because it's one that's bothered me a long time, and it's something Natalie's pointed out to me a few times, and she's very right to. When TERFs claim, like, yes, all people who have cervixes are women, there are girls, right? Like, girls exist. You know what I'm saying? Children, girls, right? Okay? And some girls have cervixes. And to call them women just because they menstruate or could bear children or whatever is actually very harmful and anti-feminist. Anyway, alarm bells should be going off in anyone's head when someone says to you, women is a word that people are going to stop using. It's ridiculous. Let's carry on reading the article. And just to reiterate what we just read, someone tweeted, "You're telling us that you've noticed that for hundreds of years you've neglected and overlooked women, and then in the same breath you are unable to name those people you've been ignoring." And this is just exactly a point where it's like, so along the same axis, right? Is that there or there? Along the same exact axis, limits in the field of gynecology, right, harm women who have, cis women who have cervixes and vaginas, and trans men and non-binary people who have cervixes and vaginas. And the quickest way to be clear and concise is to say people with those bodily parts, right? Whereas misogyny, right, affects women. And that's a crucial thing because it's something that's very observable, and there's a lot of discussion among trans people as well about the distinction between the experience of a trans man, a non-binary person, a trans woman, and actually that trans misogyny is far more prevalent than any other kind of transphobia, right? Anyway. So, it isn't an argument against gender self-identification. Surely we're well past that. So this reminds me of a conversation that I had with my brother about trans people in sport. That was like, so trans people would love to have interesting conversations about sport, right? And like, for example, my friend Alice does boxing. Her bones, right, are denser, and this is something that gets brought up about trans women when talking about sports like boxing, right, is like denser bones, so you'll have this biological advantage. But boxing is stratified by weight class, and if someone's more of their body weight is bones, because their bones are denser, they actually have a disadvantage because they can throw a weaker punch. Now, maybe with their denser bones, they can take the punch harder. I don't know, right? But there's an interesting conversation to start having there, but we can't have any of those conversations because it's just fucking flattened, right? By transphobes who are threatening our basic existence. And so this isn't an argument against gender self-identification. Surely we're well past that is very frustrating, because it's like, surely we're well past that. What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're well past that? Oh, great. I'll let the Home Office know, and I'll get my ID documents sorted out tomorrow then, in that case. Okay, let's get back to it. So, it's more about an influenceless evolution of language, which is fundamentally about communicating clearly. Even if making the arguments ends up aligning uncomfortably with reactionaries and regressives with whom I have no truck, even if making the arguments ends up aligning uncomfortably with reactionaries and regressives with whom I have no track. She's saying that... She's saying... Rosie here is saying that it will be uncomfortable, but she will have to align herself with reactionaries in order to communicate what she's trying to communicate. What the fuck? Like, again, like, why aren't the alarm bells going off? You're claiming that women as a word is just going to disappear? What? Did Atwood write this article or just link to it? I missed the beginning of the stream. She just linked to it. But she has been defending it because loads of people have been like, well, that's a fucking TERF. Why did you link that? And she's like, no, she's not a TERF. Read the article. I went through. The Toronto Star is a paywalled site. And so I was like, well, I will do a nice little stream here and read the article for everybody. Okay. In one fell swoop, The Lancet, remember this is a medical publication. Yes, again, they should use correct terminology as a medical publication. Reduced womanhood, biological or metaphysical. That's interesting. So that's anyone else who's a woman, right? So I'm metaphysically a woman is what there is the distinction there, right? Biological versus metaphysical. No, it's fucking ridiculous. It's simply that woman isn't actually a biological term, right? You don't have a woman cow or woman cat or whatever, right? Okay. To purely anatomical parts, a gross reversal of the century-long campaign to not only achieve equal rights, but for women to be seen as more than their biological and rampantly objectified sexualized packaging. This is fundamental to feminism and humanism. Further, we are seeing in, for example, legislation passed or coming down the pike in US to severely restrict abortions, basically undoing Roe versus Wade, how fragile these gains can be. So, we covered this the other day on the stream, the Texas abortion situation, basically deputizing citizens to be vigilantes against abortion. Attacks on abortion, okay, I don't know what argument you think you're making exactly. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the whole point is, like... Okay, fine. I will steel man the argument instead of just, like, giggling at it or whatever. The steel man of this argument is that you need the term woman in the context of abortion rights in order to talk about misogyny. But no, right? You can still talk about misogyny and you can still say that people who are trying to ban abortion hate women, right? And then in other sentences, when you're trying to explain correctly with exact and precise language who this affects, you don't have to say women because it's not true, right? You don't have to say women anywhere that it's just not true. You say people who may require abortions, people who get abortions, people who have had abortions, because factually, none of those groups are simply women. Whereas, the people who are legislating against abortion, yes, they are doing it because they hate women. So I can certainly tell you, Ted Cruz does not have trans men in mind when he's signing off on disgusting anti-abortion laws, right? He hates women, and you can talk about misogyny, and you can talk about how these people hate women without just speaking incorrectly about people who need abortions, people who may need abortions, people who have had abortions. The correct term there is people who have abortions. Jeez. This article sucks, and I think my take still, as I said already on this stream, someone was saying, like, we know how this is going to go. Margaret Atwood's a lost cause now. She's going to be all this thing, this thing, and this thing, and this thing. I think that's a bad attitude, That's a bad attitude. That's too doomer, right? It's important to take a breath, okay? I think she's falling for shit here. And on the off chance that you see this, Margaret Atwood, I love your work. And I've done another stream where I was really impressed by your resistance to TERFs and your explicit calling out of TERFs previously. And that was really cool. And I hope that you take a moment to try to understand why this is bait from TERFs, right? Well, I'm not even calling Rosie a TERF, to be clear. This could be someone who has herself fallen for this deliberate wedge issue to drive people away from supporting trans rights, right? Because this person herself is writing, I'm not arguing against gender self-identification, but it's silly to say that you can't talk about women, the word women is going to disappear, right? It's quite absurd, frankly. And further to that, right, if people want to read about transmisogyny, okay, I suggest the book A Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano. It's a fantastic book. I also suggest The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay. Natalie's been reading it, and everything I've seen from it has been excellent, okay? I will fight alongside my cis sisters on battles to do with misogyny. And in many cases as well, right, trans men and non-binary people who have cervixes will also be fighting the same battles, right, both in solidarity and where it just directly affects them. And I know that they will be fine to acknowledge that, like, it's misogynists who do these things, right? It is quite ridiculous, I think, to say that woman is disappearing as a word, and that this political organization against misogyny will be lost because of complex gender constructions. That Lancet episode was not an overwoke outlier. That the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, took detestable liberties by deliberately mauling the words of beloved and brilliant Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in marking the one-year anniversary of her death, reaching back to comments Ginsburg made during her confirmation hearings in 1980, wherein she spoke about the right of women to obtain an abortion. The ACLU unilaterally removed woman, replacing it with person. So why did they do that, right? Well, you see, when you have more information, when you've become more informed on an issue, and you want to speak precisely and exactly, right? It's okay to update something with the new information that you have. It hasn't become overly complicated there, right? Now, the argument that it's overly complicated to talk about a person's right to obtain an abortion instead of a woman's right to obtain an abortion, the argument that that's more complicated is necessarily an argument that people at large, right, because cis people at large aren't informed on trans issues, they will become angry, they'll become confused, they'll reject this thing. That's just not true. You can't see things that you haven't learned about. Like, your brain just, like, smooths over them. We're all very dumb. And our brains just smooth over things that we haven't learned about. And trust me, someone who hasn't learned about trans people, about trans men and non-binary people who might require an abortion, they will see person who needs an abortion, and they just won't think twice about it. Unless they have fallen for TERF bait, which is what you're looking at right now. It came out thusly: the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a person's life, to their well-being and dignity. Whether the government controls that decision for people, they are being treated as less than a fully adult human and responsible for their own choices. That's correct. Anthony Romero, executive director of the ACLU, also subsequently issued a groveling mea culpa, promising he'd never again drastically alter quotes in the future. But is that really a lesson that needed to be pounded into his head? And still, Romero justified his interference by claiming that Ginsburg would have supported more inclusive language. Maybe so. I would really like to know what she might have thought, but we don't and can't, and it's outrageous for anyone to mishmash the justice's voice. Women have abortions, or I suppose in the tiniest of numbers, people with female genitals who identify as male or fluid can terminate a pregnancy. I'm shifting positions now further into the article. I really feel this person is willfully quite shitty. And again, I'm trying to give. I want to give Margaret Atwood a chance here, and the benefit of the doubt. Years and years and years of being a notable feminist shouldn't be immediately discarded when someone makes a first step, especially if you want to approach them in a way that will not push them further towards these types. But this article is pretty fucking gross. That statement there, three-word sentence, women have abortions, that's, some women do have abortions. 1 in 3 people who can have abortions will have one in their lifetime. And then this person said, or I suppose in the tiniest of numbers, people born with female genitals. And it's just like, so what are you trying to do when you're trying to say that one set of genitals is necessarily female? Because actually female genitals is a longer phrase than vagina, right? Or cervix, right? You're being like less concise in your language. So if you're gonna try to pretend this is a conversation about language, you're tripping over your ass right now, Rosie. Like you're actually you've set a standard through which you are failing. That's pretty gross. Also, always the argument, I suppose in the tiniest numbers, people born with female, like the tiniest of numbers, always to argue that like because trans people are a small proportion of the population, that we count less somehow. How many people are allergic to peanuts? Okay, and yet when someone has a serious peanut allergy, because of recycled air on planes, they don't serve peanuts, right? We cater for small groups in the population all the time, right? And we don't just like act like because they are a smaller proportion, they matter less somehow. That's disgusting. This is reprehensible. I think this is, another thing here is that, this article makes a point of like, this article frames things as the social media outrage, the mob, and so on. I hope that I'm showing that I'm perfectly calm in reading this, but it is disgusting. Like, you're saying factually inaccurate things, as if you are boldly speaking truth to power. This is no good. This is no good. This is gross. Okay. Women have babies, or in the tiniest of numbers, people born with female genitals who identify as male or fluid can get pregnant. You're saying fluid. I don't know if you just don't know the term non-binary, or if you're deliberately refusing to use it. It's very frustrating. It sucks. Yet in 2016, the British Medical Association recommended staff use pregnant people instead of pregnant women. So again, it's no less concise. And again, people will hear that, and if they have never heard of a trans man, they will just go women. It will go in the ear, and before it reaches the conscious mind, it's just gonna women, right? If they've never heard of trans men before, and that might feel uncomfortable for some people, but it is a fact. Like, that's how it will be, and it won't be an issue to say pregnant people, and by contrast, it's accurate, right? And that's a binary situation. You can be accurate or you can be inaccurate, And if you're talking about these facilities are for pregnant people, right, and you're being accurate, then that includes trans men and non-binary people who can get pregnant. And if you are saying it's for pregnant women only, right, you're accurate, then you are necessarily excluding those people, right? And that's an intolerant and intolerable situation. It's you can't that necessarily is just removing trans people's ability to just live in society. A British hospital now instructs staff on its maternity ward to use birthing people instead of pregnant women. You know, we can all, I mean, you know, my subjective personal opinion is that birthing people sounds pretty gross. Like birthing, talking about the act rather than talking about people as being pregnant. You know, but that's my subjective opinion. But still, people is fine because women are people. The Biden administration's proposed 2022 budget substituted birth people for mothers. Rep. Cori Bush has used that term while her congressional squad teammate AOC has talked of menstruating people. These are women I admire, but they've jumped the shark. Wow. Goodness gracious me. Okay. All of this recalls the point best-selling author J.K. Rowling was trying to make, Riley, in a tweet that got her bludgeoned by the mob. So, I'm gonna get angry, and I'm trying not to, but it's because of, like, my basic existence being threatened by people who call themselves feminists. And I'm trying to not get angry, and I hope that if Margaret Atwood were to ever see this, she might relate woman to woman about the experience of people talking like your concerns don't matter and reframing the issue to pretend it's the other situation, the opposite situation to what it is, because Republican senators quoted J.K. Rowling on the floor of the Senate while voting down LGBT legislation. Okay, J.K. Rowling's bludgeoning, right, by the mob, right, has done what to her? She's richer than the Queen. She is richer than the Queen of England. Okay? She's richer than the Queen. What has it done to her that she's been bludgeoned by the mob in social media? What has that done to her? By contrast, that senator voting against LGBT equality legislation, quoting her, taking inspiration from her, right? What has that done to poor and disenfranchised LGBT people? I think it's done a lot more to them than anything Twitter has done to J.K. Rowling, frankly. People who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people, womban, wimpand, womad. Rowling was branded a TERF. Activists do like their neologisms, meaning trans-exclusionary radical feminists. So, you know, a thing here is that Margaret Atwood is out on Twitter right now, like, talking about TERFs, calling out TERFs, saying Rosie isn't a TERF, and it is apparently oblivious to the exclusively TERF and transphobe behavior of saying, what's a TERF? That doesn't exist. It's a made-up word. They just came up with it. It's not like saucisson and guitar and Spanish jazz, all objective concepts that were invented at the dawn of time by God himself. Anyway, gross. As if she was hostile to the trans movement, which she assuredly is not. So, citation needed is what I would say to she assuredly is not, because when you aggressively demonstrate your hostility to the trans community for a really long time, you need to actually, the burden of proof is on you to prove that you're not a transphobe and not on us to just trust you, is the thing. So J.K. Rowling works with Baroness Nicholson, right, who has been unequivocal about trans women should be excluded from women's shelters if they're homeless. should be excluded from rape crisis services if they have been raped. Nicholson has fought to just destroy all legislation protecting trans people as a protected class at all. And in that writing, which is, by the way, unhinged, and I encourage people to look it up, she pretends that bisexual people don't exist whatsoever, which is a funny thing that we kind of say quite often about the acronym, that, right, if the T is knocked off, then the next one will be the B. It's kind of funny there. But above all of that, Baroness Nicholson is on a level of unhinged turfery that she's going around on Twitter just calling random trans people pedophiles, and that's a matter of public record that you can just go look up. But J.K. Rowling, of course, isn't hostile to the trans movement. Oh, except, wait a second, her writing has been taken by violent transphobes like Posey Parker, who says that men with guns should go into women's bathrooms to find and presumably murder. I mean, we can read between the lines like a little bit there, right? Trans women. So that's cool. J.K. Rowling, has written with heart on sleeve about, how scary it would be for women to have to be around male-bodied people, meaning all trans women, because it necessarily implies that they're going to get raped by them, which is a despicable and disgusting thing to say. It's a despicable and disgusting argument to make, and then to pretend that she is not hostile to the trans community is in and of itself despicable and disgusting. And then some bookstores removed her work from their shelves. Were she not a gazillion-selling author, Rowling could have lost her publisher. That's a very interesting sentence, isn't it? Because they really want to put the punch at the end there, right? Rowling could have lost her publisher. In a parallel universe where she isn't, again, richer than the Queen. In Britain, where roughly 680,000 people do not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, according to government figures, midwives at Brighton and Sussex University hospitals were told to start using terms such as chest milk instead of breast milk. This apparently because some transgender men who give birth and nurse their babies were distressed at being reminded of what they were doing with those lactating female appendages. This person sucks and is spitefully, deliberately attacking trans people at this point. And again, I would hope that Margaret Atwood or anyone else sympathetic to what's going on here, because I am sympathetic to what's going on here and I've been trying to give Margaret Atwood the benefit of the doubt the entire time, I would really advise you to take a moment here and understand that this is the same as if a man were in the middle of saying why feminism is making things too complicated and confusing everybody, and just took a little moment to just like spitefully jab at women, right? Just take a little like, and we all know they're all too emotional. Some shit like that, right? Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean. I'm looking right in the camera, right? You, the person who's watching this, who's a little unsure, right? You know what I mean. Like, it's okay, I'm not conjuring examples super quickly because I'm a little upset, to be clear, right? I'm a little emotional, okay? But like, you know what I mean, right? If a man were in the middle of saying why feminism makes things too complicated, and it's just gonna complicate everything, and it's gonna let bad people win.
Oh, they
right.
don't want to call them post-men anymore. They want to call them post-people.
Right.
What are they trying to do?
We had all this in the 2000s. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Right. But seriously, right, in the middle of that, just going like, and you know what women are like, too emotional. Right. That's what this would be like to say, to just say female appendages there. That's gross. I sincerely, I really mean this. I sincerely hope you can see that's like a spiteful thing to do there, talking about people who are distressed and then being like they're distressed by reality is painting them as delusional. Do you understand that? Okay. So although surely breast is a gender-neutral term, as both sexes have them and both can develop breast cancer. Well, I would agree with that, and that's why I, for one, think that chest milk is not a very good term. But, you know, if it were if it were to be determined, right, I wouldn't want my opinion to be everyone's reality. I would want people to think about what is concise and exact language, and that there to be a sensible process at play, right? And if chest milk turned out to actually make more sense, right? But then there are obvious common sense solutions here. Like if you have a trans man, right, who is not comfortable referring to his chest as having breasts, right, and would rather you said chest milk, why would it be wrong to then use it with him, right? Or a non-binary person with them, why would that be wrong? It wouldn't, would it? Right? So if we're agreed, like I and Rosie writing this article are agreed that chest milk is not a good term and shouldn't be used, but we can also agree that if someone comes into the ward who would rather use the term chest milk because they don't like to talk about their chest as having breasts, that would be okay, and that there would be nothing wrong with that, and that actually it would be intolerant and actually quite violent to pretend that there's a problem and that person needs to have their access to services diminished in quality and experience a lesser quality of those services, like as if they themselves are a lesser quality person of an inferior class, right? This is all directly a phenomenon resulting from trans activism run amok. And again, I will say here, this is a point at which I do believe Rosie DiMano, a Toronto-based columnist covering sports and current affairs at The Star, follow her on Twitter at @rdemano. I at this point do believe she is a transphobe, because to say trans activism run amok, right? Just to return to Natalie's example for a moment, can't say postman anymore, has to be post person. Can't say policeman, has to be police officer, right? Can't say fireman, has to be firefighter, right? It's PC gone mad. It's political correctness gone mad. We've heard all of this before, especially if you who are watching this are a feminist. You've heard this before. You know this. You know this inside and out. Trans activism run amok? That's political correctness gone mad, isn't it? It's the same words, right? Trans activism run amok? Come on. I get the passion for recasting language to improve gender and LGBT equity to minimize the cognitive mental salience of males. Oof. Well, so there's a lot going on in that sentence. Because she has repeatedly referred to vaginas and breasts throughout this article as female body parts. So it's interesting. So who's she referring to when she says males? Maybe I'm wrong about that one. Let's try the sentence again, because it's a little bit opaque to me. Clearly, I'm trying to make sure I understand everything here before I pass judgment, because I don't want to be quickly, hot-headedly leaping to conclusions. I get the passion for recasting language to improve gender and LGBT equity to minimize the cognitive mental salience of males. Is the cognitive mental salience of males the patriarchy? Is that what's going on? Salience. The quality of being particularly noticeable or important prominence. Right, okay, well, she is. So she's talking about the patriarchy then, right? She's not talking about trans women. She's not calling trans women male. Better hope not. That would suck. Oh, jeez. It's very important, by the way, again, if you're watching this and you want to understand a little better, that you understand trans misogyny and how it is truly inseparable from regular misogyny. And, please read Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano. Please read The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay. Please read books about trans people by trans people. The same way that I hope you would read books about racism by black people, by indigenous people, by other people of color, rather than reading books about racism by white people. I sincerely hope that you wouldn't be reading books about racism by white people, or books about feminism exclusively by cis men, right? Because, you know, a part of this here is that, like, is how trans women haven't really been mentioned in this article, and then there's males pops up really near the end, and I've just got a little feeling there, but I won't go into depth with it because I don't want to alienate people who might not fully understand everything that's going on here. Once again, this article is really gross. It's turf bait. Rosie DiMano, happy to call her a turf at this point. And I think that Margaret Atwood's fallen for some stuff, and I hope that if she would watch this, and people who are sympathetic to her point of view would watch this, they would think, hang on a minute, I'm hearing from a lot of people who aren't trans about trans issues, and I'm hearing from trans people a united position here, right? Maybe I should read some things about the topic by people who actually experience the world as that minority group. The movement has been spectacularly successful in the progressive West, although English isn't as heavily gendered as, say, Italian or French. Truly props for an undertaking that has given voice and power to a demographically historically oppressed, horribly shaped and disproportionately subjected to violence. Right, so again, just like acknowledging that trans people have a really fucking hard time, but at the same time, trans activism run amok. So, like, you're just, like, you know, so, like, we have a really shit time, but if we get uppity and, you know, try to do a bit too much, that needs to be pushed back against. Maybe sort of shoved downwards, kind of shoved, right, downwards as hard as you can if we get a little bit out of line. Merriam-Webster was the first dictionary to add gender-neutral pronouns they and themselves to refer to a person whose gender identity is non-binary. Interesting sentence there. As if the singular they is used by neither Chaucer nor Shakespeare, nor the Bible, when in actuality it's used by all three, because the singular they has been in English for hundreds of years. Very interesting to point to, like, gender-neutral pronouns to refer to a person whose gender identity is non-binary. It's kind of an interesting cherry pick of a fact, right? Like, they've added to the definition of they and themselves that the pronouns can also refer to people who are non-binary, but actually the singular they has existed in language for hundreds of years. But these examples go far beyond insistence on neutral pronouns into an outer orbit of linguistics where both women as a gender and woman as a noun are being blotted out. There's more than a whiff of misogyny to it. Why woman, the no-speak word, and not man? Why not persons who urinate standing up, or people who eject semen? Certainly there are words, they are slurs mostly, that are no longer acceptable. Woman shouldn't be one of them. The battleground of language has turned into a battleground of agendas. I am woman and I am roaring. So, let me put this one out here. There's more than a whiff of misogyny to it. Maybe, if you whiff that, you'll realize the smell is actually your own farts. So I am woman and I am roaring, and if you doubt that I am woman, then just fuck off. So that's the thing, is if you doubt that I am a woman, just fuck off. And I don't actually have any tolerance for anyone who would doubt that I'm a woman, and I won't be explaining my identity to anyone here today or ever? Ever sounds good. I'm going to go with ever. So I am woman and I am roaring, and that is just as legitimate as this woman who is roaring, only on the topic of trans issues, maybe a little more legitimate if I'm going to go and speak about trans issues. And fundamentally what she's doing here is speaking on trans issues. She's not talking about the battleground of language or the whiff of misogyny. She's talking about trans issues, and she's not trans, and all I can deeply say, like all I can say, and I can only say it just as strongly as possible, is go read books by trans people if you want to understand trans issues. The same way, once again, that I know that nobody here is talking about racism without reading books by people of color, right? And nobody here is talking about feminism without having read any books that aren't written by cis men, right? I know that no one watching this is doing that. And so I can also count on you to read books by trans people about trans issues. There's the article. I got a bit upset towards the end, but that's because of Rosie DiMano's repulsive transphobia, frankly. We're going to be streaming Resident Evil 6 shortly. I've got some delicious dinner here that Natalie cooked. Doesn't that look nice? Steamed vegetables, delicious. Gonna eat that, and then we're going to come back and stream some Resident Evil 6. I hope you'll join us. Remember to subscribe and share if you enjoy the streams. This will be up on my archive channel afterwards. And that's really all I can say, I think. I hope that Margaret Atwood watches this video. Literally this. Hi, Margaret. I love your work. I admire you deeply. And I hope that you come to your senses, frankly, because this is speaking over and ignoring the people who are most affected by the issue in favor of the more privileged group. And I can't say it any more clearly than that. See you all shortly for Resident Evil 6.